Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Abby West, and I am the Director of Multicultural Content Programming at Audible. And I'm thrilled you are here with us to meet and hear from the Queen of Reinvention, as Fortune magazine calls her, Coach Pamela Mitchell.
Ah.
This former entertainment exec turned coach founded the Reinvention Institute almost 20 years ago. And now, with her Audible original, Mastering the Skill of Reinvention, she delivers a step by step process for shifting gears in work or life, guiding you through each element of the reinvention journey, from vision mapping to goal setting to tactical organization and launch. Mastering the Skill of Reinvention is filled with real life examples from her years of reinvention coaching, and it is the guide to turning the life you dream of living into the life you actually live. Welcome, Coach P.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Abby. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here today. I'm also really just thrilled to have this Audible original out in the world. I firm believer in all of the things that you are sharing with everyone here, but I really want to ask you. Early on in the original, you have a quiz that asks, "Do you need a reinvention?" Kind of feels like pushing people away, but why was it important for you to get people to do the self-assessment rather than just telling them buy into the idea that you need a reinvention?
Well, here's the thing that's really important. I want to start by saying that reinvention is a skill that I believe that everyone should have and will need at some point in their lives. But just like you have a toolkit to build a house, and maybe you're building a stone house and you've got some wooden tools, it's not the right tool for every situation. So that's why we have this quiz right up front to say, is reinvention right for you? And depending upon the situation that you're facing, it may or may not be the right tool to pull out of your toolkit. So it's important to assess that right up front. And then if it is the right thing for you, then to understand, there's a few more quizzes that go on in there, the quiz, like what's your reinvention personality, so that you can customize your reinvention to your journey. So these are the things that it's important to know right up front before you even dive into the journey.
I love that, that old adage that, to every carpenter, every problem requires a hammer. I appreciate that, this
I
does.
am not that carpenter. Yes, it's a hammer.
That'll do the trick. But I appreciate that because we are individuals. There are some universal things, but in each moment in time, an individual needs something different.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's
That's
really
right. And for those of you who are listening, I just want to say that reinvention is the thing when you're looking to make a shift or a change. If you're looking to just climb the next step in the ladder of your current career, that's more leadership training and skills. Or if you really just want more money and that's all you want and that's your number one goal, the fastest path to cash is using the existing skills that you have and finding someone who's willing to pay you more for them. So those are two situations where, if that's your thing, just learn reinvention for the future. But if there are other things you want, now's your moment.
That's really helpful. You also admitted that while cheering on a former client's success, you felt a twinge of jealousy, and you shared how jealousy is an emotion that can be useful and not something to hide from. From personal experiences with you, I know that you try to get clients to explore negative emotions around career and life paths and decisions. Can you explain why that is?
Well, I think what is really critical in this is something that I see often where people want to move immediately into the tactical level of reinvention. And so they come to it and they're like, okay, tell me what I need to do. But reinvention actually runs on two levels. There's that tactical level, the external level, and then there's the internal level, which is your mindset. And your mindset is the place where emotions sit. And so, therefore, if you're not dealing with what we call negative emotions, that doesn't mean that they're not affecting your results in your reinvention. I call it the magic equation in the Audible original, that thoughts plus feelings equal actions. So therefore, you really need to take a look at those things that might be blocking you, which is really not a place that we tend to be comfortable looking at. So, but if you don't do that, don't think that they're not blocking you externally. They are, they're showing up somehow. But I do want to say something about jealousy, because that in particular is a very fraught emotion. And, hey, we coaches are human too. Like, we feel all the feelings and we work ourselves through it. And as I'm coaching people, I'm taking myself on my own journey. So jealousy is a really important, I would say, lighthouse. It shows you what you want in your world. So don't hide from it, even though it can feel like very triggering in today's social media world to say, oh, this isn't happening and this person has this. But really, it's just a signal. These negative emotions are signals for things for us to work through so we can clear roadblocks.
That makes a lot of sense. And in that space of people just wanting to take action, we are in the midst of what everyone's calling the Great Resignation, when many people are choosing to pivot from their existing jobs and careers. And since you've been engaged in this area of work for a while, what are you seeing that many may or may not match up with news reports? And what do you think people who are considering a big change should think about?
Well, okay, so I'm a coach, so I love precision in language, and I want to pull out the word big as it relates to change, because sometimes a big change is exactly what people need. But I'm here to tell you that it's not always what people need. And I think that's what the disconnect is between what the media is reporting and what's actually happening in terms of what I see. So the media likes these very huge transformational stories because that's what makes it interesting, right? So it's the Great Resignation. Everybody's resigning and leaving. But there's a far more nuanced thing happening behind the scenes. And I call that the Great Rearranging. And so people aren't all leaving. Some people are just rearranging how they're doing what they're doing. And, they're coming up with like, hey, I want to be located somewhere else. And I'm going to go to my company and have them give me permission to like maybe only work remotely or something along those lines. Or I just want to change the timing of how I do. So this rearranging is happening behind the scenes. And that's the thing that I think the news is missing out on. But it's the great thing for people to know, because you don't have to resign to have what you want in your life. So that's a huge, huge thing I want people to understand, is that you can have what you want without having to walk out the door.
No drastic change is necessarily needed.
Do not use what is that, power saw when pinking shears will do. There you go.
I'm really loving our like very hands-on theme here. I'm such a hands-on person. What do you think, going back a little bit, what do you think people should consider when they're making this big change, and what should they think through to know whether they need the pinking shear or the axe?
Power saw. Because axe is like, oh. Sure. So there we are. I say that people, first of all, need to take a look at what they want out of their lives. And, when people come to us for like a reinvention master plan session, which is this session where we do a deep dive to say, like, what is it that you want? It's not that it's just a career, although career is often the trigger. We actually look at, what do you want out of your life? Because career is a mechanism to deliver a life that you want. So it's important to think about holistically, what are the things that you're looking to have at the end of this journey, not just from a career perspective, but from a life perspective, and then reverse engineer.
There's preciseness there, right? And I appreciate that. I have been remiss, and I have not mentioned to our audience that we will be taking questions at the end of our conversation. And so please drop in your questions and I will feed them through to Coach Pamela, and you can also benefit and have something that's kind of targeted to your space. Switching gears to talking about the fact that you also switched careers. How did you know why and when you were ready to make a move?
Well, my story is that when I was on Wall Street, which is a career that I had dreamed of and worked towards, and so I'd put a lot of energy into it. And so when I first got there, Midwestern girl walking down Wall Street, literally, and I was all excited. And about 6 months later, I realized that as I was walking down that street, I would feel the stress in my body, and it would climb to the point at which literally when I was walking through the doors, I could not breathe. And I think what's important, I talk about this in the Audible original, is that our body is often the first harbinger of when things aren't right for us. And it's important to tune in to see what's going on. So for me, it was the fact that like I just always was gripped and feeling stressed and unable to breathe walking through. And then the other thing too was I sort of took myself to what I call future Pamela, and looked at in 20 years, did I want to be senior in that role? I was already a senior, but I was like, do I want to be here 20 years from now? And I realized, oh, heck no. I can't. The idea that not only was like I didn't want to do it, it viscerally was like, oh God, I just can't deal with that vision at
Mhm.
all. And that like very physical resistance to it was my sign that it was time to make a change.
I get that. You are very hands-on with your clients. What have you learned about helping so many people make big life changes that, or not necessarily big,
Thank you.
important life changes
Important.
that has impacted how you live your own life as well?
You know, one of the things that that I committed, and let me just say that this is my calling. When I decided that I was going to leave my corporate career, I actually turned down the biggest job of my career to start the Reinvention Institute. So, and then I went to coach school. And I'll be on my soapbox for a minute because anybody can call themselves a coach and they don't need any type of licensing or training or anything
Right.
to just say that they're a coach. So if you're watching this and you've got a coach, make sure that that person is trained, that they've actually gone to an accredited school to actually take you through your journey, because that piece is really, really important. Because as we're taking as coaches take people through a journey, we're using tools from a toolkit to help them through that journey. And myself, I'm having to grow in order to guide someone else. I'm not giving advice because one of the rules, coaches don't give advice. We're here to help you unlock your wisdom. I don't know what your truth is. I'm here to help you unlock your truth. But if I am not going on my own journey, then I can't ask the right questions, and I don't know what tools to pull out of the toolbox to get you to where you need to go. So I have to be committed to growth as well. And in fact, little secret, I have my own little notebook that says lessons from coaching. So I am writing, making notes during coaching sessions. And then after every coaching session, I write down an insight that's for me and my own growth. Because as I'm coaching someone else, I'm learning as well.
That's it sort of speaks hat tips to your belief that you need to learn reinvention skills throughout your life, right? It's not a one and done situation. Applies to everyone. There's always, is it the same as saying, I was about to say, it's always room for improvement. Is it akin to having room for improvement, or just room to expand your life?
I'd say there's always new levels of growth, new levels of happiness. And rather than improvement, I would actually use the term mastery, right? It's called Mastering the Skill of Reinvention. Our method is called the Reinvention Mastery Method. And it's about mastering the skill. And I think what's important in that mastery journey is to understand that even when you master something, there's always another level of it. And that sometimes you lose the game. Like that's the point of mastery, right? It's never perfect. It's never, we talk about this in the original, and I say we because I consider it to be a coaching session. So if you're listening to it, I'm coaching you, and we're talking about the fact that reinvention runs on the athletic model, and it's about mastering this skill.
Well, you've been in this line of work in inspiring people to make smart changes, not big, smart changes for a while. How have employees' needs changed over time? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think, and this is really one of the outcomes of the pandemic. What has changed is this relationship between employer and employee, where there's more parity in that relationship. The employee has more power than any time that I've seen since I started this nearly 20 years ago. Um, if the employer doesn't want to craft something that works for the employee's life and interests, then there's usually another employer that's willing to do that because of this war for talent and all of the things. So I think what's happened now is that there's more room for the whole person in the career piece. Used to be that you just had to live where you lived and all the other things, but it's not like that anymore. Now there's space for us to be ourselves and say, this is what we need on all levels as we're working.
To that point, what is something you believe hiring managers or bosses should do, know, or talk about to encourage great employees who are considering a big change to stay instead?
Well, I think smart employers should really think about creating, like, what are the reinvention pathways within their own firm. As I said, people don't have to leave to reinvent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just doing the job itself differently. Sometimes it's moving between departments. Sometimes it's, coming in and doing things a little bit differently. So if you are, as an employer, thinking about, if someone wants to do something different, not just climb the ladder, but they want to do something different, what are the mechanisms that we have to facilitate that, to help reskill them in different areas? Then you are basically maximizing your investment in that talent. Because here's the thing, the world has shown that companies have to reinvent themselves. So smart companies are creating mechanisms for their talent to reinvent themselves, then they're going to be able to retain that talent. So it's a retention strategy.
That makes total sense. And I will put a plug in here that one of the favorite things that Audible does is a program that allows for trying out different jobs and rotations in different departments and seeing a different space.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
Exactly. So that exposure is really important. And then building a framework around that for people to test these ideas, and for the employer to take people out of their boxes and say, hey, people can evolve just like we as a company are evolving. Let's see what else our talent can do, because it's a partnership.
I'm going to remind our audience that we'll be taking questions in just a short while, so please drop them in there. Coach Pamela, what is one thing people tend to do or not do that sounds like a good idea, but actually will get in your way as you're thinking about making a change?
Oh, man.
It's like so many things.
Yeah, no, like, what am I going to take off the shelf here? Okay, I'm going to actually go back to this piece of wanting to skip the mindset work. So that's one thing that's really, really important, because if you skip that phase, there's a reason that it's vision, mindset, then strategy, then launch. So trying to skip that phase is something that people are like tempted to do, but it always comes back to bite them in the strategy and launch phase. The other thing, Abby, is, and I talk about this in the Audible original, is understanding basically your personality type. Because one of the things that's really important in reinvention is to customize your journey to your personality. So there's this way in which people kind of expect themselves to be in a box, like there's one way to do it, and if I'm not doing it that way, then I'm wrong. No, take that off the table, but you've got to understand you as you go on this journey. And that's why I tell people in there, like, they can self-diagnose, like, hey, here are my self-identify rather as one of the three personality types: mapmaker, trailblazer, navigator. Or they can take a free quiz on my site, planetreinvention.com/quiz. But either way, that knowledge is crucial right up front, so that you can craft the journey that's not at odds with how you operate.
So many insights. Whenever we talk, I'm like usually furiously writing down notes. But we'll keep moving. When you were writing this Audible original, You used the title Mastering the Skill of Reinvention very deliberately. You've mentioned you're very deliberate with your words.
Mhm.
Why these words?
Well, as we talked about, mastering is important, but I want to pull out the word skill because what people tend to think is art, mastering the art of reinvention. And art is one of those things, again, it's a word that's very loaded. People have a lot of baggage around whether or not they're art or not, but it's actually a skill. It's a practical life skill that can be taught and that can be mastered and that requires practice, as all skills do. So, this is why it's the skill of reinvention. It's something that is important to have because we've been talking about what I call self generated reinventions, where you kind of say, I want to change,
Mm.
and then you make the change. But there's also involuntary reinvention where life kind of throws you that curveball and you're like, I need to make a change. My industry is disappearing, or whatever it is. So that's why you need that skill and need to be practicing it and to always be able to reach new levels of it, to master it. I say that it's the only real insurance. This skill is the only real insurance for career happiness.
Mm. Something because there's self actualization in it, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, we don't control what life throws us. We really don't. But what the skill of reinvention allows you to do, if you master it, is to take whatever situation is presented to you and navigate yourself to some place that you want to be. That's the power of reinvention. That's the power of this reinvention mastery method that is like all throughout this Audible original. That now you know how to take yourself someplace, whether you wake up one morning and you're like, oh, I think I'm ready for something. Or you wake up and I'm like, ooh, I got to do something here.
Powerful stuff, Coach Pamela. Thank you. I've reached the end of my questions for the moment.
Mhm.
For today. I'll have more for you. But I'm going to dive into some audience questions. Michelle B asks, are there any tips or ideas on how to start a new career in a completely different industry without feeling like you're going backwards to entry level roles?
That's a very good question and a very common fear. So here's the thing. What happens usually is that we're looking at the tasks that have done. And when we make that leap, that's where we would go back to entry level because we're thinking, I haven't done those tasks before. So, really, what you have to do in reinvention is look at yourself as a constellation of skills and talents. And once you look at yourself as a constellation of skills, like I have a skill of communication, I
Mhm.
have a skill of presenting, I have a skill of doing this, then you can look at how have I used these skills in my current career, my current industry, and then how are those skills utilized in the industry that I'm targeting? And then that's how you can make the leap without having to start to do the tasks of it, right? Because now you've got a track record of utilizing those skills successfully. It's now how the story is, how do I do that in that career that I'm targeting? And that's actually how I made the leap from Wall Street to entertainment, was looking at myself as skills as opposed to looking at myself as tasks. So just specifically, I'd never negotiated an entertainment licensing deal, but I had negotiated contracts and managed partnerships and worked with attorneys to execute for intellectual property and licensed that. So the core skills can be applied no matter what industry I was in. So that's how you take a look at it, Michelle, is you take that step back and you say, oh, here are the skills. How are those skills utilized in that industry?
Love that. And I will share with the audience that I used that planning and thinking with the book that Coach Pamela has behind her, The 10 Laws of Career Reinvention, was how I switched careers and landed at Audible, thinking skill set first versus, itinerary,
Right,
essentially.
exactly.
Moving on to the next one, Sue K asks, how do I handle my reimagination slash pivot as someone that's in the 60 plus age group? I'm finding it challenging to convince recruiters that my management skills are transferable to positions that I am aggressively seeking that are below management level?
Love that question. Okay, Sue, couple of things. All right. And we didn't talk about radical honesty, Abby, but
Yeah.
I'm going to bring radical honesty in here. Okay, so couple of moments. So reinvention, what do I say? The road to reinvention is paved with bricks of radical honesty. So this is real life reinvention. First thing is that ageism is real. So I'm going to like real life. We are not reinvention can have magical results, but we don't live in a magical world, right? So it's about creating these things in a real way. Second thing, Sue, to understand is that recruiters are salespeople and they work for the company. They don't work for you. Their job is not to find you another role. So they're not, unless they've come to you, they're not interested, right? They'll be nice to you because maybe at some point there's a role that you fit, but they're not there as a matchmaker, right? And this is a common myth that people have that, oh, I'm just going to talk to recruiters and I'm going to find a job through recruiters. That's not going to happen, right? Because they're salespeople and they don't get paid unless they do that match. And the easiest match is somebody down the road that did the same thing, right? So the thing is that what I would recommend is you target the companies that you're looking at and then look to your network and then look to the roles that you want and then make direct pitches. Hey, we're on LinkedIn. You can find the names of the people that you want to reach and send them an email, send them a little note, see who you know that knows them and have them know you. So targeted direct pitches to the people for the roles that you want, and then crafting your own story. We talk about that in the original, crafting your external story so that it's congruent with the results that you want. And that's a process you have to go through as well. Doing that will also help.
Great advice. Chris D commented that anger, I think this is coming off of the earlier conversation about difficult / negative emotions. Anger, there's usually there's some emotion or feeling underneath it. This may be at any age. How can you help someone through feeling understood and heard?
That's an interesting question. Okay, so one thing I'm going to say, and again, this is why it's important for somebody to go to what I call trained coaches, certified coaches that have gone through an accredited program, is that coaches are very clear on the boundaries between what is coaching and what is therapeutic. And we are clear that we are not therapists. And, I will send people to therapists in the moment that they need it. So my point when I hear this question is I would need to know more to see, is this really a therapeutic issue or is this truly a coaching issue? My sense on this level, like just at the top level, is that when there's like a very big blocking emotion that the person just can't get beyond, whether it be anger or these types of things, then I tend to recommend a therapeutic path. But from a coaching perspective, sometimes it's how we're presenting ourselves, whether or not we're heard. Sometimes we need to actually take a look at ourselves to say, well, how am I saying, or am I aligning with what the person, if it's whoever's not hearing, let's assume it's the company's not hearing me, but maybe I'm not actually aligning what I want with what they want, which is what it takes to be heard in any conversation. So, again, there are many layers to this and there are two pathways. So hopefully there's something in there that can help you, Chris.
I hope so. Now, our last question here is from Mauricio M. He asks, what's a great example you can give us of someone who you think has pivoted their career the right way?
All right. Well, I'm a coach. I'm about to say the word right. There is no right, right? There is only what is fulfilling to that particular person. It may or may not make sense to the rest of the world. But if that person says, I have made a change and I am happier for it, and my life works better for me for it, then that is what is quote unquote right for them. So let's say that right off the bat. You know what? But I'm going to give you one that I just love because I was just thinking about this just this morning in the shower. You know who I think has done an amazing job is Snoop Dogg. Okay. I mean, look, we all watched him during the Super Bowl out there, doing his like hits. But come on, Snoop has reinvented himself multiple times from being a pimp, straight up pimp in the streets, to musician, to spokesperson, to business owner, to all kinds of things, right? So
Right.
he's just mastered that skill of reinvention. That's what just came to mind because I was like, dang, Snoop, you got it going on, Mr. Reinvention yourself.
I mean, you may have a new partner on that one there. It's a good call out.
I was just like, oh, yeah.
Well, Coach Pamela, thank you so much for sharing your insights with the world today. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us and for sharing your questions. To learn more about how to bridge the gap from where you are to where you want to be, listen to Coach Pamela Mitchell's Mastering the Skill of Reinvention only on Audible, and follow Audible on LinkedIn for more conversations just like this one. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.